Namaste and welcome to Happy Alien Life. Let me ask you something very important. What's the one Indian export that's older than Buddhism, more global than Bollywood, more peaceful than any policy, costs nothing to adopt, and has silently reached every corner of the world? Let's talk about something even more powerful than our GDP. India's soft power, that invisible but undeniable force that's shaping how the world sees us. We're not just exporting goods anymore. We are exporting meaning, emotion, identity. It's yoga. But this episode isn't about breathing exercises and downward dogs and chakrasans. It's about how yoga, yes, yoga, that ancient sacred, grounded tradition has quietly become one of India's most powerful tools of global influence. And what if I told you that it's also India's most powerful tool of diplomacy? Today, this episode is about something I'm deeply proud of, and not just as an Indian, but also as an author. A while ago, I published a paper titled Yoga Soft Power in an international journal, and it has been cited by several scholars, policymakers, and cultural diplomacy experts around the world. And the deeper I went, the more I realized something powerful. Yoga is not just a wellness trend, it's civilizational diplomacy. Yoga may be slow and silent, but it's changing the world and India's place in it one breath at a time. Let's start with a fact that surprises most people. In over 190 countries, yoga is practiced regularly. There are over 300 million yoga practitioners globally. In the US alone, 1 in 10 people does yoga. And that's not a fitness trend, that's civilizational influence. In 2014, our Prime Minister addressed the UN General Assembly and proposed the idea of International Yoga Day. What followed was historic. The UN declared June 21st as International Yoga Day, with 177 countries co-sponsoring India's resolution, the highest in the UN's history. Yes, more countries agreed on yoga than on climate change or nuclear disarmament. Why? Because when you export yoga, you're not just exporting flexibility, you're exporting peace, discipline, harmony, self-awareness. You're exporting India's spiritual DNA. Yoga is a perfect example of how non-coercive influence works. We didn't lobby, threaten, or colonize. We just took breaths and the world followed. When Swami Vivekananda spoke at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, he didn't talk about GDP or geopolitics. He spoke about the union of mind, body, and spirit. He sowed the seeds of India's global voice, not through conquest, but through consciousness. Decades later, it was yoga that traveled with the Beatles to Rishikesh. It was yoga that made Oprah Winfrey quote the Bhagavad Gita. And it was yoga that made many prime ministers and presidents of many countries adopt yoga. Even the Chinese military adopts asanas into their daily fitness routines. Let that sink in. Yes, China teaches yoga to its soldiers, because even geopolitical rivals recognize the universal value in ancient India's wisdom. Yoga is a non-coercive, non-intrusive form of diplomacy, and the amazing thing about yoga is that it is a particularly flexible concept that can be presented as authentic and ancient, but hip and contemporary in the modern world. It doesn't need embassies, it doesn't need ambassadors, it only needs intentional breadth and cultural confidence. Countries like South Korea, Mexico, and even Saudi Arabia have integrated yoga into public health policies and education. For example, in Saudi Arabia, yoga is now recognized as a legitimate sport, not because of politics, but because it works. India doesn't need to shout its greatness, it simply needs to continue offering it. And this is where India's genius comes through. Most countries export ideology or commerce. India exports introspection. Yoga doesn't ask you to convert, it asks you simply to connect. Connect to your breath, to your stillness, to your purpose. In a world riddled with information, wars, ideological extremism, and digital anxiety, yoga becomes not just a therapy but a strategy. And unlike other soft power tools like food, like cinema, yoga carries with it the weight of dharma, of balance, and of truth. It is India's most benevolent form of assertion. It's not India-centered, but human-centered. When 10,000 people perform Surya Namaskar at the Times Square in New York on June 21st, that's not branding, that's civilizational elegance in motion. Even in geopolitics, when nations argue, they often find common ground through culture, through literature, through art, through language, and now increasingly through yoga. India doesn't need to sell yoga. The world reaches for it in times of anxiety and burnout and war. And that's the kind of global positioning no PR agency can buy. Now, here's where we must think ahead as citizens and as a country. If yoga has reached the world's gyms and studios and apps and UN halls, shouldn't it be embedded in India's public diplomacy strategy? The world may have adopted yoga as a wellness practice, but India has the opportunity to reframe it as a policy pillar, not just as a posture. Yoga has already gone global. Let me leave you with a few stories. When was First Lady, she introduced yoga in the White House as a wellness initiative. When the Japanese Prime Minister visited India, he attended a yoga demonstration before trade meeting. In Rwanda, for example, women in rural areas have started yoga to address PTSD after the genocide. None of these actions were political, but all of them were profoundly Indian. And that's the genius of our culture. It doesn't need to conquer, it just connects. Yoga is not just India's gift to the world, it can be India's framework for global healing and harmony. And policy must reflect this sacred opportunity, because the future won't be about who can stretch the farthest, but about who can reach the deepest. India has that depth. Now we must make it our strategy. So here's my request to you. Next time you roll out your yoga mat, know that you're not just stretching your limbs, you are participating in India's greatest diplomatic movement. You're reminding the world that India doesn't just have power, it has purpose. Because while the world may have discovered yoga, India never forgot it. And in that memory, we find our future. Jai Hind.